separated.
Yeah! Ow! Ugh! What the? I'm still in this storage closet I call a bedroom. What the heck just happened? Okay. Teleportation check. Hair still a mess. Eyesight. Yeah, it could be better. Gender. Intact. Okay. Now where'd that Z-Man asshole go to? What the? Son of a bitch teleported my room! This looks like something out of Yellow Submarine. Did he transport me into the world of the film? Man, I don't think I've seen this thing since I was a kid. I'm gonna go check this out. Ah! Holy crap, why don't I remember how messed up that movie is? And how do those monsters take my shirt without taking my overshirt?
Well, here we are again. It's always such a pleasure. Remember when you tried?
Hello? Hello, Mr. Strife. I gather you are aware of your current situation? You moved my bedroom to a cult cartoon based on a subpar Beatles song. Weird, but not really that intimidating. It's not so simple as that. The space beyond your workstation has been placed in a quantum flux to prevent you from leaving before your task is complete. So my room is just gonna bounce around random dimensions until I'm done? Do you know how long it takes me to do these videos? Wait, what am I supposed to do for food or general hygiene? Did you even think this plan through? Hello? Hello? Guess I should go put on a shirt. Okay, so last time I was here I was talking about Half-Life, and I stuck to mostly the single-player campaign. I will get to the multiplayer, not that I have a choice anymore, but for me the next logical step is to talk about the original game's expansion packs. Expansion packs are, traditionally, extra content built using the same engine as the core game, offered up to expand on the original title in some way, or just to extend a game's shelf life with new content. A few examples. While Quake 2's expansions were mostly by-the-numbers exercises in shooting more bad guys, other games like Civilization 4 use expansions to add new core gameplay systems. A personal favorite of mine was Baldur's Gate 2's expansion, Throne of Baal, which was basically Baldur's Gate 3 and wrapped up the series' ongoing story arc. In the case of Half-Life, it had two expansions, Opposing Force and Blue Shift. What made these titles unique at the time was that they took place during the timeline of the first game, only from different perspectives. Valve was working on other projects at the time, so development was helped along by newcomer Gearbox Software, known nowadays for titles such as Borderlands and Duke Nukem Forever. Now originally I thought I'd make this a versus video, comparing and contrasting the two expansions to see which is better, but it's practically no contest. For now I'll focus on Opposing Force, but first I need to get one thing out of the way. Steam does not treat these expansions well. I neglected this in the Half-Life review, but I don't like how these games have been supplied through Valve's digital distribution platform, Steam. The menu screen for Half-Life felt criminally minimalized, at least compared to the original retail version. The same goes for Opposing Force and Blue Shift, but what's worse is Steam treats Opposing Force like it's a multiplayer game. Instead of the seamless loading screens from the other games, we get a brief black screen and a loading server bar pops up. Also, neither expansion comes with its original soundtrack, opting instead to recycle tracks from Half-Life 1, and they just don't fit. I had to track down a copy online for this review, so thank you, Internet. Anyway, on to Opposing Force itself. If you opt to run through the tutorial section again, you'll see right away just how much new stuff Gearbox brought to the game. Instead of the Hazard course, players are shipped off to boot camp, complete with angry drill instructors voiced by John St. John. Although his lines are less Duke Nukem and more Gunnery Sergeant Hartman.
Where are you from, soldier? Texas! Holy cow! You know what comes from Texas, don't you?
You get to play around with a couple of the new weapons and get an idea how the new soldier NPCs can assist you, like the medic who's a walking health station, and the engineer who cuts sealed doors open, but only designated ones, basically making him a key that needs to be kept alive. The other new mechanic added to the game is rope climbing, which is basically having a moving ladder. The rope physics are pretty nice for the time this came out, and it adds to the realism a bit, but oddly enough, it's barely used in the game. Allow me to prove it with a montage! Yeah, that was it. Not really worth a montage, but I just want an excuse to use that song. The story begins with main character Corporal Adrian Shepard. No, not that Shepard, this one. The random faceless Marine.
Corporal Shepard, huh? Looks more like Corporal Dog Meat to me!
Anyway, Shepard and his squad are en route to Black Mesa shortly after the Resonance Cascade disaster in the main game. Along the way, they try to reenact every scene with soldiers having dialogue ever.
HQ. Where the hell are we anyway?
Well, the pilot thought we were heading to your mother's house. So far, this all looks familiar.
Yeah, that's real cute, Jack.
Anytime, anywhere.
And then suddenly...
Listen up, people! We have an extremely hostile situation! Holy shit! Two three down! Two three down! What's going on out there? Let's keep this high!
Yeah, it's been about 1 minute since the game started. Something bad was due to happen. So after barely escaping a horrific crash, Shepard is revived by a rather helpful Black Mesa scientist, which is puzzling because by this point in the story's timeline, the Marines should have been shooting up anyone in a lab coat for at least a day, so it's kind of weird they'd be rescuing him. It's especially strange since Shepard never really receives any orders or mission parameters.
Do you have a problem, Private? I will give you your orders when we have reached the LZ. You got that, soldier? Sir, yes, sir.
Anyway, Shepard tries to regroup with his unit only to learn they're pulling out, and almost makes it to the extraction point. That is, until the G-Man steps in and decides he has other plans for Shepard. Well, I guess dickishness must run in the family.
Well, here we are again. It's always...
I heard that, Dax. Yes, the G-Man makes an appearance here as well, and he takes a much more direct hand in Shepard's survival. Early on, you get trapped in a room flooding with toxic waste, and the G-Man just watches until the last second before opening the door, almost as if he's making up his mind whether or not you were worth saving. He pops up now and again after that, similar to in the last game, but at times taking a more direct role. Anyway, things don't go well for Shepard after he misses his ride out. Besides the regular Zen aliens infesting the facility, a new breed of invaders seems to be cropping up, and they're not any better. He gets some help from other stranded Marines, and occasionally the new helpful but overweight Black Mesa security guards.
Stupid machines. Why don't these ever seem to work? Hey, you wouldn't have a quarter I can borrow, would you?
Well, you don't think I'd go into combat with loose change in my pocket, do you?
And then things go from bad to worse when the military sends in Black Ops teams to finish the job, which now includes wiping out the surviving Marines. Yeah, the government cover-up stuff was a bit of a stretch in Half-Life 1, but here it's really hard to swallow. I mean, I can understand wanting secrecy and everything, but why would you kill the people who were there trying to do the same thing you're trying to do?
Being a part of a show like this, protecting your country from alien invaders. Think of it. Nobody but this special unit and the President of the United States know what really happened here tonight.
Although to be fair, the Black Ops have a much simpler plan for stopping the aliens. Take a nuclear warhead from storage, because this research base just happened to have a few ICBMs lying around, park it somewhere underground, and just nuke the whole base. It probably won't close a dimensional rift, but at least it's straightforward compared to the military's original plan. Send in the Marines, shoot all aliens and everyone involved. Something else? Profit? So while looking for a way out, Corporal Shepard ends up shooting his way through a ton of aliens and hostile Black Ops before discovering the aliens building a giant portal to bring a huge... something or other, which he shoots in its obvious glowing weak point until it dies. The end.
Quite so.
Okay, so obviously I don't think much of the plot, but the game seems more focused on spectacle and action, along with expanding the lore of Black Mesa. Players discovered the science team has been tampering with the border world of Zen for a while, as they have an entire biodome complex built to study the local wildlife. Someone also had the brilliant idea to take the ceiling-hanging barnacle monsters and turn one into an organic grappling gun that also eats things. Best or worst grappling gun ever? You decide. It seems to me there was a real emphasis on the organic in this game, as 3 of the new weapons are living creatures. Besides the barnacle gun, there's a parasitic bug that latches onto Shepard but acts as a self-recharging lightning gun. There's also this weird squid thing that eats and shoots green spore pods. Who's a good living spore launcher? Who's a good spore launcher? Yeah. Other new weapons include the Desert Eagle, which is just a reskin Magnum but with a laser sight. There's a sniper rifle, which is really handy a couple of times, but you're not given many sniping opportunities because you're stuck indoors most of the game. The saw machine gun is probably my favorite, as it's a lifesaver when facing down the bigger and badder aliens. Shepard also overcompensates in the melee department by getting not 1 but 2 melee weapons, a combat knife and a heavy pipe wrench. So he's got one for clubbing and one for stabbing. Yeah, I think I'll stick with the crowbar, since it can do both. The coolest new toy is the experimental displacer cannon. You find this one after an accidental trip into Zen and meeting a wayward scientist. The primary trigger fires out an unstable portal, killing anything it hits, while the alt fire teleports you to a random location in Zen. Sometimes the location is a bit too random, so you can't always rely on it, but when it works, it's a good way to pick up some spare health and supplies. So Opposing Force has a lot of new stuff to offer, but as a whole, is it any good? Yes and no. Like I said, there's a real emphasis on action and spectacle, so there's a lot of that, and it's really good. The soldier NPCs are a nice addition, but you only come across them a few times, and their AI isn't the best, so don't expect them to last long. The best use of the soldier's AI is in a sequence where Adrian finds an engineer who needs to open a door, but the engineer is wounded, so you need to locate and lead back a medic to revive him. Assuming he doesn't get stuck trying to get through a door. The new aliens are pretty nasty, but there's just something about their art design I just can't get into. I especially wasn't fond of the Pit Worm, which is a sequence that rips off the weird Hydra monster from the Blast Pit chapter in the first game. And it doesn't help that the way you defeat it is a rather fourth-wall-breaking gag. I see what you did there. There are some nice fan moments where you revisit locations from the first game, or see them from a different angle, and the action is good enough that I can still give this a recommendation if you've just played Half-Life and want more. Just don't expect too much depth. But since this game does take place at the same time as Half-Life, keep an eye out for a chance to create a temporal paradox. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, having said all that, there's probably one more thing I should talk about. The fate of Corporal Shepard. Now, at the end of Half-Life, Dr. Freeman is taken away and offered a job of some kind by the G-Man. Unless you're stupid and turn down the mysterious alien-like man who can teleport you around at will. In Opposing Force, the G-Man doesn't seem interested in hiring or is unable to hire Corporal Shepard, and instead chooses to preserve him somewhere. This has led to some speculation among fans that the character would return at some point after Half-Life 2 came out. This hope grew a little stronger when Portal was released a few years later, and fans noted an interesting Easter egg in Aperture Science. See, in these screenshots of the Aperture Science computer stations, you can see certain keys are highlighted on the keyboards. This is rather common for audio and video workstations, as they're used to quickly mark keyboard shortcuts. But what's interesting is the highlighted letters are just the ones you need to spell Adrian Shepard. Not to mention, the abbreviation for the Aperture Science handheld portal device looks like an abbreviation of the name Adrian Shepard. While I certainly wouldn't mind seeing Corporal Shepard return to the Half-Life universe, possibly in a tie-in expansion where he teams up with Barney after the end of Half-Life 2 Episode 1, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I just don't think Valve has any plans to use the character anytime soon. For a start, he really has no personality or backstory. Does he even have a face under that gas mask? Second, he's a creation of Gearbox Software, not specifically Valve. While Valve certainly helped create the game, I don't think they created Shepard with any long-term plans for him. So after spending all this time talking about Opposing Force, you may be wondering what I think about the other expansion, Blue Shift. Well, let's just say I only technically consider it an expansion. Valve attempted to break into the console market with a new version of Half-Life on the PlayStation 2. Along with slightly better graphics, it boasted a new standalone story known as Blue Shift, and a co-op mode called Decay. And this was when Valve learned the importance of good relations with their fans and customers. These were originally going to be PlayStation exclusives, and the fans went, to put it simply, apeshit. They felt Valve was being unfair to loyal fans who had supported the franchise since it started, and wanted the chance to buy what the PlayStation 2 crowd was getting. Well, they eventually got it. Mostly. Blue Shift was finally released a year and a half after Opposing Force came out. The disc allows you to play both expansions standalone without having the original Half-Life installed, and it contains a high-definition pack for all 3 games. Blue Shift stars one B. Calhoun, a security guard at Black Mesa. This one, in fact. Yeah, I'm not sure if this was a shameless concession to the fans or what, but I'm not filled with confidence taking the role of a character who is thwarted by a stuck door. And why B. Calhoun? Why not just call him Barney? They gave up and did in Half-Life 2.
It's me, Gordon. Barney from Black Mesa.
Anyway, you start your shift dealing with a lot of cranky scientists until the disaster hits and Barney gets dropped down the world's tallest elevator shaft. Miraculously, he survives unharmed apart from a brief period of unconsciousness, when realistically he should be dead, severely injured, or wearing a fancy headcrab hat. By the way, that's an actual product in the Valve store. After some fairly unexciting action and fairly easy puzzles involving boxes and switches and such, you find a chance to escape the facility and one Dr. Rosenberg, a scientist working in teleportation. After saving him from the military, who actually decided to detain him rather than execute him, you meet up with his colleagues in an old lab and try to teleport safely outside the danger zone. Overall, it's a very short expansion. I managed to complete it in under 2 hours, whereas Opposing Force took between 3 and 4 hours. Nothing too earth-shattering happens here, apart from a new character or two and some fan-pleasing moments. Barney's adventure is so inconsequential that the G-Man only bothers to make a pointless token appearance, which is odd considering he seems to teleport everywhere else. Maybe he wanted to take the scenic route for once? So Blue Shift is fairly benign and unimportant to the series, and doesn't stand up well against its big brother Opposing Force. While I wouldn't call either expansion essential, and they're both fairly easy to acquire, if you can only pick up one, I'd recommend Opposing Force over Blue Shift. The High Definition Pack was a nice extra feature. What it did was upgrade most of the standard character and weapon models to the more detailed, higher polygon ones made for the PlayStation and Sega Dreamcast ports. It's entirely optional, and I usually do without because I just prefer the look of the older models. For a long time, the only way to get it was by buying the Blue Shift disc, but it turns out it's available for free on Steam now. You just have to search for it online. I think that pretty well covers the expansion packs, so next time I'll dig into the really meaty core of Half-Life, the multiplayer and the mod scene. So, I'm still Dax, I'm not really sure where the hell I am, but hopefully I'll see you later. Okay, so... Oops, wrong franchise.